Hey guys, this is Patrick Carl. You might know me as the guy with the most IM medals in the world, or something like that. I'm also the CGO of FNATIC, and you're watching Duncan 4 in Shield's YouTube channel. Yeah, pleasure being here.
Right, I'm here for another Reflections interview, and my guest for this one is going to be DSN, who is a legendary Swedish player, most famous for playing in the team FNATIC. In fact, one of the interesting details is, once you got to FNATIC, you didn't really need to go anywhere else. You just got to have a whole career there, pretty much. But this is something people won't know, DSN, is in the early days, you were playing for many years before you became FNATIC DSN and got all these accomplishments and this kind of like Hall of Fame career that you were able to have. And people might be shocked if I say this. And by the way, just as an aside, we did do in like 2012 at the end of 1.6, like a pretty extensive text interview, because that used to be what I used to do back then. There wasn't video technology in the same way. And it does cover a lot of this stuff. It's just that, I mean, it was almost 10 years ago now. I'm sure things have changed. We can reflect differently. So if people want to check on any details we don't talk about, I'll put that in the description here. But anyway, the place I wanted to start with this interview is you played for many years before you got all this fame and these big accomplishments. And in fact, as harsh as it might sound, I remember at the time you were in that class of players where domestically you'd come up, you showed you were good enough to be in teams, but people thought you were something of like a bust. People thought you were like a land choker, or, you know, I mean, obviously Sweden had a very, very competitive scene back then. And so if anyone gets this stigma attached to them, it can be hard to overcome. What do you remember of this period, the early days?
Yeah, I mean, what do I remember? Like, it's such a long time ago, so so it's hard to remember exactly how it was. But yeah, I mean, I used to play Counter-Strike. I started out in like '99 when the game came, right? And I played very locally in the beginning, like at a local cafe close to my school in Gothenburg. And I was like dabbling around in lesser known teams for quite some time. If you know the scene in Sweden at that time, you would realize there were only so many good teams, right? We had the Game Online, we had the NIP, and then for a bit there, Too Easy had some success, I guess.
Sure.
But then there were like all these other teams that played in a league called Swedish Elite Serien, or SEL, and I was sort of, you know, it was hard to get to the best teams because they had been to Dallas and played CPL. You know, they had their accomplishments, and I was just a guy who was in like a half mediocre team for most of my life, I guess. So yeah, I mean, what to say really? It was a hard time in Sweden because it wasn't so professional as well, right? The scene, basically, like every year for CPL. In the beginning, at least, you would have a few teams going, mainly like the SK, NIP, Game Online.
The big dogs, sure.
Yeah, the big dogs. And then I went to like the local lands in like Norway, CPL Oslo, for example, with my team. And I switched team quite a lot, so I can't really remember exactly which teams I were in at this time, but I played in Gamers.nu, which you're familiar with. That was like very local. I think we went to 1 or 2 or 3 maybe international tournaments. And then there was xPerience.se, I think before that, and we didn't really go to a lot of tournaments. So yeah, now I'm getting a little bit off track here, but
it's all right. How about this? So back in these days, another thing is, like, first of all, like, the reason I set it up that way, like I say, it's not a diss, it's the fact that at the time, because Sweden was considered the best in Counter-Strike, and because it's the beginning of the game, and you have these people where, I mean, people like Heaton and Potty, if they ever choked on LAN, no one knows, because they just seemed to win the first LANs they were at, so there wasn't really that story for them. So unfortunately, if you aren't sort of that sort of a person, I can tell you from knowing those guys, they had a very harsh read on people who they might recruit to their teams. Like, they really thought, like, they had this like very binary thinking of like you're either a winner or a loser, basically. And if you show any weakness, they think like, forget about that person. Whereas one thing we actually had to learn in CS was, except for people like that feel almost like the fucking, I don't know, Greek gods or something, like some mythical creatures that just win anyway. Everyone else has like a life cycle. You know, you start out, you play your first tournaments, you get accustomed to it, you maybe don't have the right teammates, you move to a different team, you learn things. It's like a movie, you know, you go through all the acts of the movie, and at the end of the movie you get your success, and that's when all the hard work pays off, you know. So in these early days, was your skill level good enough to be in these teams? Were you just not good at networking with people? Like, what do you think the initial things that kept you out of the top teams were?
I mean, skill-wise, yeah, maybe a bit. Like you said, you had to go through the motions to become really good, right? And I think personally, I obviously peaked for some time in FNATIC, like in early FNATIC, I guess. And back then, like, yeah, SK, NIP, those players that were in those teams, they were very good, like better than I was. I used to play with them. They had like a gather channel on IRC. I'm not sure if you remember IRC.
Sure.
Yeah. So they had like a gather channel before the Faceit or ECAs of the world where we did pick up games. So I did play with them every now and then, these big caliber players. And yeah, I mean, at that time, they were better for sure. I was still starting out my career. I think I had some talent. But yeah, I still needed to work a lot on myself and a lot on my self-improvement, get the tournament experience and all that. I do remember though, like one time, and I can't recall exactly which year this was, but this was before FNATIC at least, that Heaton and Potty asked me and cArn to join NIP through like an IRC message or something. So that happened once, but that was probably around the time when we were in Eyeballers, if you remember that.
Right,
which is
yes.
way back, yeah. And then when it comes to other teams, like I played in a team for a time there's this like quite long road in my hometown in Gothenburg. So the cafe team I play from was like 5 minutes away from Game Online. So we would go down to Game Online and we would watch them play. And they were sort of, the idols at that time because they were a local team from Gothenburg, even though they had international players. But yeah, I remember seeing players, like Element and stuff that I looked up to. So that was a big inspiration to get better myself, I guess.
Right. During these kinds of time period, obviously you already had connected with cArn. I mean, he's from like some small town in that sort of region, right? And if people don't know, he had basically the two of you were in a bunch of these teams together, and so you kind of had the same rep, both of you, which is like you've both been around a few years. For whatever reason, you haven't made it in the top teams yet, and then if the whole FNATIC thing hadn't come along, who knows what happens in history? But obviously, sticking together ended up being the player. You were in the Big Grip team together. That's where you got your first kind of successes. You went to the CPL, etc. Like, why was cArn like kind of your partner in crime even before FNATIC? If people don't know that, like, what is it about this guy that you just were drawn to each other, or just decided to stay as a package? Even though, as you said, you were in a bunch of different teams.
No, but I think Patrick is a very like good leader type personality, especially for teams. He's like always positive. Well organized, even though he was young at that time. So yeah, after we first started together, like playing together in a team, I always enjoyed to play with him, and I think he enjoyed to play with me. We also have like the same bad sense of humor and stuff, so we got along really well outside the game, and we both had ambitions, I think, at that time to improve ourselves in Counter-Strike and to get to these tournaments where you could play against like the better teams and compete versus the Heaton and Potties of this world, I guess.
How would you describe him as a leader, as like a teammate in that sense? Because obviously you played with him for so many years. Because the interesting thing I've always found is, I remember even these early days before you guys were in FNATIC, and the one thing that's funny about cArn is I can see why he's been able to transition to sort of more the business side of esports, because he can be so reasonable when he talks to you and seem like just such a chill guy. But if you ever sort of probe him in the competitive areas, I mean, he's really cocky, but in a way that's kind of justified. Like, he did do a lot of those things. So he does secretly, like, well, not even that secret. If you press him, he'll just tell you. He does think he was the best at whatever he did, or that, he'll have some angle. Like, if he doesn't think he was the best, he had the most medals or whatever. He always has some angle he can go with where he's clearly a very confident person, So what was he like as a teammate from your perspective, or a leader, etc.?
No, but he was, like I said, he was a very organized person in general. Like, I remember we were young back then, right? We were like 17, 18 when we started to travel quite a lot. And Patrick would be the guy who had like the printed like itineraries.
Right, okay.
So he's like that kind of a person, like very well organized. And as like a IGL, obviously, he would be like, he would get everybody behind him. Like very, very upbeat and positive. I don't think he like ever complained at anybody except himself. So that is obviously like a very good thing when you're spending a lot of time together. have a person who's like positive and upbeat, and yeah, I mean that's pretty much it, I would say. Like you said, he's a competitive person though. Like I remember me and Patrick, we played a lot of games and like non-CS competitions versus each other in our lives. Like for example, we played Broad War, StarCraft,
Right.
or we would play Quake, and it would almost get violent, you know. Like we're both, we would both want to win so much. So I remember one time, because we're also like we're bad winners. Like we would taunt the other person, right?
Right. Okay.
We won. So I remember one time we were playing like on our laptop some Broad War game or something, and Patrick was taunting me after a win. So I got so like mad, so I accidentally smashed his headset like into the floor, into the ground, and like I had to buy a new headset for him. So yeah, like that ties back to he is very competitive. He would hate to lose, especially to teammates.
What about, since you said that you were both ambitious people, like even though we've set it up, like, you know, you've been quite honest here, you didn't think you were as good as the top players at the times, and you were just working your way through the local scene still, they were already going to the international tournaments. If you're going to try and be a primary AWPer though, as you're coming up, you got to at least think you can be the best, right? Normally there's only one of those in each team, DSN. Like that's one of the hardest roles to break into the top scene is the primary AWPer. Like that is the guy where if he chokes on lands, you're not going to get picked up into a team. So you must have thought you were pretty good, right?
Yeah.
Or you could be good.
I thought I could be good. Yeah. Like I had a very big passion for the game. I think I spent a lot of time. I had a very singular focus on playing Counter-Strike. I said no to a lot of other fun things that you can do, like when you're a young adult in Sweden, I guess, just to pursue this Counter-Strike dream. So yeah, of course, I thought like at the end I was pretty good. Obviously, I mean, I would say there are AWPers that are better, like a lot of AWPers that are better, but yeah, as a Swedish AWPer, like for sure up there with a few other names.
Well, that's another interesting thing, right? Because when you come to being FNATIC, listen, mate, it's still the same in Counter-Strike now. Like, what happens is if you're in the teams that win the tournaments and that are placing the highest, the fan just thinks you must be the best, no matter who you are in the team. And it means that, I won't say people get overrated all the time. Sometimes people are justifiably rated that way, but it means that, like, for example, if someone was the best AWPer, like right now, Device in Astralis, if Astralis is the best, a certain fan will just say he must be the best AWPer, even if, I mean, that's not a great example because he probably is, but even if someone else is actually just individually better, it will be assumed. So when you came to being FNATIC, I'm sure a lot of the fans thought DSN was the best AWPer. Now, I'm not being a hater, you know, there was just some amazing AWPers in that period. There was Kogu and fucking Fraud and later on Mark. You know, there's a lot of really amazing, we're talking about like these people are the first people you think of when you think of the AWP. Delpan, obviously. So how would you cut, what was the skill set of DSN with the AWP? Because I always thought you weren't just the standard, like, you just go to the corner and kill all 5 people. You kind of had your own flair, right?
Yeah, I mean, I would say there are definitely better AWPers like through the history of Counter-Strike 1.6. Like some of the names you mentioned, I would probably rate higher than me. I always saw myself as more of a hybrid player, even though I played with AWP a lot. But I obviously wasn't as skilled as like a Markloff or Kogu who practically never missed for periods of time. So, I mean, yeah, it's hard to rate yourself, but I mean, I was a decent AWPer, decent enough to play on FNATIC, so I guess I must have been like okayish at least.
Well, one thing I'll give you credit for, mate, is, listen, like, again, if we're contrasting against those AWPers, yeah, I would have obviously been like, no, these FNATIC fans are overrating him. But one thing I actually came to appreciate, especially over the FNATIC years, is, like a lot of the players in FNATIC, you were a very clutch player by the end, actually. Despite how the reputation was earlier on, I would say you were a very clutch AWPer. Like, if I put you in a 1v1 or a situation where you've got to hit one shot, I'd put my money on you to hit it.
Yeah, I mean, also like being in an environment in FNATIC, obviously I had very good teammates around me. Just like every day watching like Forrest and Get Right play and, you know, cArn play, Gux play. I mean, it's like, it makes you better, right? Like every day you get to see their moves and like how they think about the game. So that sort of made me a better player. Not necessarily a better AWPer, but like, you know, watching Forrest playing situations is like so sneaky and they think so many moves ahead. So yeah, that was definitely like a development period for me in my career playing with those guys.
One thing I always found very interesting about the FNATIC team that you guys made, where you, cArn, and Forrest were the core for like 5 years or something, a long, long time actually playing, and then you added in some of these other names you've mentioned here, was that actually the first 2 or 3 years of FNATIC, the team that you made, which had a lot of success, like even if you didn't win the championship, you were nearly always top 4 or making the finals or in the mix anyway. I think what was interesting is how it contrasts against the great Swedish teams of the past, because most of those teams, as we alluded to at the beginning of the interview, it was all about just being the best player, was being in those teams. Like they were the best player, and then they recruited the next best players. And actually, a lot of it was almost more akin to what like a FaZe clan is in CSGO now. It's about you just get all these superstar names and you just try and make it work. And the concept is, if everyone just frags out, you're going to win the game because you just got too much almost like force in the game, you know. But actually, a lot of those teams, they weren't as concerned with like, you know, you play with this guy for 4 years and you build up your team synergy with him, and, you know, it's all about team play and like having a great atmosphere. They were almost like more like cutthroat, like, right, you win, or if you get bad, we kick you and then we'll get the next best player. So it seems like FNATIC had a different ethos in this sense, like especially that the first few years, you were very loyal to your teammates. You kept the same team together. You went through ups and downs together, and you had a lot of success. So where did this come from? Is this just who you were as people? Was there a conscious idea of we're not just going to be cutthroat and kick people every 6 months if they do badly?
Yeah, I think it was mostly that we got along really well outside the game. We had a lot of fun together, you know, traveling around together, having boot camps together. So it was just like a right fit of people for the most part. And yeah, me, cArn, and Forrest were together for a long time there. So we obviously built some chemistry. And yeah, like I think SK, for the most part, like they always had the stars, right, in Sweden. Maybe not so much during the FNATIC days. Maybe that.
You had a few of them at that point, sure.
Yeah, we had a few at that point, of course. But like the philosophy, or like, you know, the NIP and SK names will always be associated with these like big performers, right?
Of course,
like Spawn and Heaton and. So yeah, I mean, I'm not sure exactly why it lasts this long, like this core. Maybe we like didn't have so much pressure on ourselves to always win. I guess we were happy with you know, like consistently performing, consistently competing, I guess, for the number one spot, I guess.
Thing is, though, this also seems like there was part of it even was conscious, right? Because I remember probably the most shocking recruitment that this team ever made was, listen, yes, you had the one where you sort of veered away from this philosophy and you did just get the stars of the day, you got Gux and get right these next up-and-coming big gamers. That was almost like an SK-type move. But then after that, if people remember, when Gux got removed at the end of 2009, you brought in Threat, right? Who at the time, obviously, had been an in-game leader. Like, this is definitely not a superstar player. No one's thinking he's going to frag everyone. But I remember talking to some of the FNATIC players back then, and it's because, aside from the year when you'd gone with just the skill approach, like the logic I was told was that in your team, since you travel all this time around the world and it's, you know, it's not just about only winning in the game, I was told it was about having a social fit. Like the person has to sort of make sense with our group of people. Like we can't just play with someone just because they're good at shooting people with the crosshair, but maybe they're a terrible person, or they just don't have the, you know, they have like maybe they don't have a professional attitude, and whatever it might be. There's a lot of ways people personally could mismatch. Was this something important, do you think? Because this is not the way a lot of other teams did their moves. They just did it based on what happens in the server. So I think in some ways this is almost like you're ahead of the game in some ways, understanding like personal dynamics maybe. Yeah,
I mean, for sure. We looked a lot at like the personal fit of the players we were targeting. We didn't really want to become a team that just went for the skilled players. So we made sure that for the most part we were quite successful with finding people that meshed well together with the team, I guess. We had some misfortunes there too. Like we weren't perfect, but for the most part, I would say we had a pretty good core of 5 people, or iteration of 5 people that have fun together. And I think that is really important. Like you said, you travel around a lot. You want to have a healthy relationship to each other or with each other, like both inside and outside the game. You want to be able to like go to all these amazing places that you get to travel to when you're a Counter-Strike player. And you want to you want to get all those experiences together, like being in, you know, USA when you're young, like living there for a bit, or staying there between tournaments and, you know, having fun. or going to China, exploring different cultures. For sure, it's important that you are with a group of people that also enjoys it, right? That like you don't have like one guy who's only want to stay in a hotel room and like watch TV shows or whatever.
Well, the funny thing is, that's another thing I think that you and cArn particularly seem to emphasize, that I think also you were ahead of the game, which is back in this day. This is the day and age where if I was at home and someone was like, what do you do for a job? And you tell them, and then they hear that you've been to wherever it might be, Germany, USA, whatever, like China. If they hear that, they're going to think, oh my God, that's so exotic. And you say like, not really. I just go to a convention hall. I watch 2 days of this tournament and then I go back home. Like I don't explore anything. And I know back then a lot of players were like this. Like I remember when those first tournaments were happening in Asia, the WEG team tournaments, the World Esports Games, and they had that one in China where it was delayed for like 2 weeks or something. And the SK team that went there, which at the time was just like a bunch of young stars and stuff, when they went there, they really did, just no joke, sit in a hotel room for 2 weeks, complain that the food was all bad and all they were eating was KFC, by the way. They were never eating Chinese food because they had no palate for it, they weren't cultured in that way. And then they just basically complained, and then when the tournament was home, they went home and they were like, we'll never go there again. And I remember just saying to him, listen, like, you had a chance there to go and like basically have a holiday. Like you could have experienced China, you could have tried out some of these things. Like, maybe you wouldn't have liked it, but it could have been like a life experience for you. So you and cArn clearly took advantage of this. I mean, as people have seen, you've even since both been back to Asia in certain places. Like, was this an essential part of just getting the life of a pro to you?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, definitely. Like we wouldn't sit around in hotel rooms. Like I would go crazy if we did that. So part of the experience, or part of the enjoyment of going to all these tournaments, was the fact that we usually like booked a couple of extra days just to explore, if we could. So we would stay around at the place for longer. Just like doing fun things, being a young adult, I guess, and just exploring. I mean, for sure, that was super big. Without that, like, I wouldn't have looked back at my like period playing games like so like vividly and with like enjoyment in my mind.
So obviously another very famous teammate of yours, and this is actually kind of the weird thing because, right, just recently, like at the end of last year, it was announced that Forrest was leaving NiP, and then he came and obviously he joined this Dignitas team, which basically remade the NiP from CSGO. And what's funny is everyone in CSGO was like, oh, this is so sad. It's the end of an era. I can't believe it. NiP, Forrest, not a thing anymore. And obviously to me, it's like, in my brain, it'll always be FNATIC Forrest. Like he was in FNATIC for 5 years. Like he's just always a FNATIC player to me. But to a CSGO fan, that's alien, right? So he was with you guys for a long time. You obviously must have known him pretty well. This is when he was also a much younger guy. Who was Forrest as a teammate back in 1.6?
Who was Forrest as a teammate? No, I think Forrest has always been a really easy guy to play with. He obviously had the superstardom. Like even back then, he was like super good, just a natural talent for the game. But he was one of those guys who would never like talk about how good he was himself or anything within the team. He was always like trying to help his teammates, never complaining. Just like a super good teammate, I would say. And I still think he is. Like, I haven't played CSGO, of course, but I would assume like that is just his personality. Like a quite quiet guy, I guess, outside of the game. But just a really great guy to be around in a team.
Listen, obviously people know it's reflections of DSN, so it's DSN's opinions. He doesn't have to be objective. He can be as biased as he wants, right? You played with and against a lot of players. Do you think Forrest is the best?
Yeah, I do. I would say, like, I mean, of course I am biased because I didn't play with like Neo. I didn't play with Mark.
You still saw these guys play though. You saw how good they were. Yeah.
Yeah, I saw them play, but I think part of my judgment for saying that Forrest is the best is also that I saw how he was as a teammate, right? How he thinks like day in and day out in practice. So yeah, I mean, I would say he's up there. Like if we're talking at 1.6 now, I would put him and Neo as the best, right? Like those two had the most success. But if I had to choose one, I would choose Forrest. Yeah.
Since people might not realize this, right, one of the things I always thought was awesome about Counter-Strike is that in the theory of Counter-Strike is that one man can't beat 5 people. It's a team game. It's like even the way you use utility and you play around each other. It's all about like team play and all this. But the cool thing is, yeah, in general, one man can't beat 5 people. But we all know in a round, and if you're really a godlike player, like some of the names we were mentioning, just sometimes for a whole game, like one guy can just take over the server. And the fact that it's a team game, but then one guy's that good can be amazing. So like when you play with someone like that, what is it like versus just playing with any just normal good player where, you know, they have a good round here or there or they have a good half? Like these are the people where sometimes they go crazy and it just feels like no one can stop them.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I would assume it's like playing with a simple, like in CSGO or something, where they're just on another level, right? Like they will consistently have these runs where they just like dominate people. And they're like truly the X factor. Like look at Simple, right? I mean, how many frags is he dropping on a consistent basis? It's like they're playing with 1.5 players almost, yes. Right? And Force was a bit like that. He would consistently, you know, be our best performer, like shutting down other teams. So it is a very big difference, I would say. Like, I mean, I don't know what you think about this, but like if you look at today's Counter-Strike, like you take a player like, let's say, a Simple and you compare him to like a player in, I don't know, like in another team in an IP or FNATIC, like one of their middle performers. Obviously, there's a huge difference, right?
Yeah, if you're talking about the absolute best player, for sure, yeah.
Yeah,
that's one thing that actually I think's held throughout CS is even though people use that line, which is obviously true in general, like, you know, the players get better, things improve. It's like one thing I've always loved about the game is the real superstar players, the best of the best of the best. It's just like football. They'll always look like they're just in a league of their own. They look like they're just floating above the clouds and the rest of us are just mere mortals playing the game, you know.
Yeah.
It's kind of cool, though. I like that aspect.
Yeah, it's really cool. I mean, like, when you see some of these players and the level they're at and the level they're able to perform on, like, it's insane. I have so much respect for like the amount of work that a person like that must have put into Counter-Strike. Like it's definitely blood, sweat, and tears, right? Like you don't just like wake up with one day and you have that sort of aptitude, right? It's insane the amount of hours and the dedication a person like Simple must have put into the game, and that I really, really respect.
Right, one aspect that I know Lurpus often used to bring up, because I found it interesting myself, was that if you talk to Forrest over the years, he'll just fully admit that, listen, he's like, I think he thinks of himself as a gamer, not just a Counter-Strike player. And so, Listen, he'll tell you he's played a lot of hours of fucking Dota and Quake 3, and this is all while playing Counter-Strike, by the way, guys, in an era when, in theory, everyone's just playing Counter-Strike. How much was it exaggerated that he would sometimes not have motivation and not practice that much, or did he really have times where he kind of like, you know, maybe there's a few months where whatever, something in the team's not going that great, or he's just bored or something? Would he actually have periods where he kind of like didn't practice as much as he could have?
Yeah, I think he had periods where he didn't put in so many hours into the game, and I think mainly it's because he was like good anyway, right? Like. It's hard to like justify it, but I think that he had periods of times where he didn't play so much, but he would still be good, right? He wouldn't just be like a horrible player or anything. He would still probably be our best performer, but maybe he wasn't as good as he could be, right? I mean, for periods of times. But then again, he also had periods where he would like be super motivated and practice like insane amount of hours. And reach that like pinnacle level. So yeah, I mean, I think a lot of players go through this, right? Like I think it's hard to always be the most motivated player. Like you have to be a certain kind of personality to be able to pull that through.
Did you have times like that yourself? I mean, I know, for example, towards the end of 1.6, you were actually pretty successful if you played poker on the side. So you had distractions that could draw you away, right?
Yeah. I mean, my own career, like in the end, I wasn't so motivated anymore, I would say. Not like I had been. Like I always had a singular focus on Counter-Strike. And then poker, like was brought into the picture, and I spent quite a lot of time playing that, like playing cards too, right? So anytime you have like distractions, I think that definitely like, I mean, it affects your Counter-Strike game, because if you, like, let's say every day you have a couple of hours of like a good quality brain power, right? And then I spent some of those hours on playing cards. Then I would come to practice and sometimes be a bit burnt out already just by thinking about like decisions in another game. So that was quite bad, I would say. Like it was pretty clear in the end that I couldn't do both.
Now, one of the things that not just Forest, but Fnatic in general were known for was being the SK killers. Like when you guys would play against SK and they were your main rivals, it feels like you won most of the big matches, like all the important ones pretty much. They had the odd time they'd strike back, but when it was this domestic rivalry, Fnatic usually came out on top. Was that significant for you? I mean, we've discussed some of your history, like SK was kind of like, they followed the same model as the old great Swedish teams. They just tried to get all the star names, and yeah, like we were saying, like some fans probably thought they had better players than Fnatic. So what did you think of this rivalry?
Yeah, I mean, like every time we played SK, it was like a hate match. We were like sort of friends outside the server, I would say, but every time we played SK it was hurt so much more than losing to any other team. So it was always like a derby sort of feeling where we came into the server. We were so much more motivated to just like really, really win. Like we didn't want to lose to SK ever. Like, and when we did it hurt hell. Like it hurt like hell. So yeah. I would say that was definitely one of the most fun rivalries we had going on, because we were both Swedish teams. We both had sort of star-studded lineups, and it was usually quite entertaining games. And we were both up there for contending for the best team in the world for the most time, I would say.
One thing I always had appreciated about the Fnatic teams you played in that I referenced earlier was just the sheer consistency of these teams. I mean, even if you didn't win the tournament, it's very rare you were ever going to get like knocked out in 8th place or lose to some underdog team. That very rarely happened. Usually the team that beat you had to be one of the best teams, and it was usually in a big match in the tournament. It was probably quite hard. So can you give us some thoughts? Like, what do you think allows a team to be consistent? Because that can, to me, I think of that and I think, right, that must mean even when it's a bad day, somehow you can still get something going in the game. You can still perform on some level in the server.
Yeah, I think it comes down to like being in a team where you're comfortable with the people you're playing with, you know, having a good practice structure. Of course, you can have bad games and you can lose to teams you shouldn't lose to, but if you're like well prepared, you have some structure, you have good teammates around you that are consistently like motivating you to perform, that already gets you, like, it puts you ahead of the competition, I would say. Look at Astralis now, for example. Like, they seem to have a lot of fun outside the game. They all seem to be motivated to practice things, right? I mean, they're like the extreme example, I guess, because they're so much better than everybody else at this. But even back then, I think that, yeah, I think the main thing for us was just to enjoy each other's companies, motivate each other, you know, think like from a round-to-round perspective, that even when we were down, we still like believed deep inside that we could turn matches around. And of course, that doesn't always happen, and we did lose to teams that we shouldn't have lost to. But I think that happens for every team in the world. So yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, it was just like the way we approached practice, the fun we had outside the game, and like the talent of our players, I guess.
One thing I thought was interesting about the setup of that team, especially with you and cArn playing together for so long, is the way that you guys handled like the tactical element and the leadership part of the game is something that I actually think just makes a lot of sense for most teams. Like, I think most teams, if they can, should move towards this model, which is that, yes, cArn's the in-game leader and he comes up with the plans and the games, but the idea was, you know, you could contribute something if you had an interesting angle. Like, obviously, if you're looking at the game and you've noticed something works, something doesn't work, people would even see in the demos, you would sometimes type it in the team say. You would type something in like, try this next round or something. How would you describe like the partnership in that regard? Because I feel as though there's a lot of teams where if you have some genius guy who can call everything in the whole game, that would be great. But usually I think if you have a couple of people, I mean, it's more heads put towards the problem. What do you think? Yeah,
for sure. I mean, it can get messy if everybody like contributes, I think, for the in-game leader. But I think like if there's one or two more people contributing, in the team, and especially in 1.6, right? He would chat a lot, so I would write a suggestion in the chat, and cArn would like look at it, I guess, and then he would evaluate if it was a good suggestion or not. Because basically, you know, when you're playing a Counter-Strike game, you're at different parts of the map, so you see different things a lot of times. So I was able to see things he didn't see, and vice versa, right? So I think we were pretty early with SCT on most maps. So we would split into like 2 callers. I would be in charge of the site I played, and cArn would be in charge of the site he played. Obviously, I mean there were synergies between the sites as well, but
Sure.
that was basically how we structured it. And then ST, yeah, I mean, a lot of our members would come with suggestions on how to play the different rounds. And I think, yeah, that was beneficial, because it's also like when you lose or when things are not going your way, like there's so much pressure on the in-game leader to pull out a rabbit like out of his hat and come up with some magical call that's going to solve everything. And obviously the in-game leader is under a lot of stress when you're losing. So it's good to have the other members like chime in. I think that's really beneficial if you can find the right balance at least.
So at this period of time, another thing that was interesting to me was when you got this really amazing lineup, the 2009 lineup, people might remember won almost everything with Gux and Get Right, these superstar aimers that came into the team, is like, if people understand the way I've always seen Counter-Strike, is I think of it a bit like a team in football. You need balance between what roles you have and who plays what type of a game. Like, for example, obviously, if all 10 non-goalkeeper players in football were just attacking all the time, if anyone did a counter-attack, you'd have no defense. You'd be fucked. So hence why we have all the different roles. And even though, you know, you can play a different formation, people typically tend to have a similar balance. Well, one thing I thought that was interesting from the outside, at least, was it looked like when you guys brought in these young superstar aimers, you and cArn sort of decided to take more of a, nowadays people would use like supportive element to the game, you know. It's like you were willing to sort of mold your own roles a little bit. Would you agree with this? Do you think you had to switch up how you guys played?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, like it was just a balancing, like you're saying, because when we brought in Get-Right and Gux, obviously 2 super talented like aimers, especially at that time, you know, they were very dominant. And coupled with Forrest, who's also like a very dominant player, I think we had more firepower than like those 3 together. Had more firepower than any other like trio of players in any other team. So we would just like bully people with them as a group, and that meant that cArn and me would take more passive roles, because we would just send them in and they would, you know, clean up the map for us.
Sure.
It sounds like super simple and everything, but that's basically what we did for the longest time. We would play these like stupidly simple tactics without like a lot of thought to them. It's basically like get in the opponent's face and let these 3 guys take the aim duels that we know they're gonna win, right? That was basically 2009, like just super simple Counter-Strike, leveraging our skill advantage that we had, like with those 3 guys. And me and cArn, you know, just, yeah, flashing and waiting, I guess, for the round to be over.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean,
the thing is, though, even though you say, yeah, it sounds like it's so easy to do. I mean, the joke is, it only works if you have those amazing players who can just shoot everyone in the head. Like, it's not as simple as just going in, because I remember actually talking to Ave from MTW, who were the team that was on top before this FNATIC team. And to them, it was super frustrating, mate, because their whole system was anti-strat, prepare for them, have all the great counter flashes. And basically, they just sort of said, if you look back now, it even makes sense. Like, if my whole game's like, I'm going to counter flash when you come in, but you don't even flash, you just run in dry and shoot everyone in the head, like that's actually the hard counter to that style of play. It's going to be really hard to adapt that and be able to do anything against, because you're making the game gunfights, and you had the better gun players in that sense, right?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, like to give you an example, 1.6 Inferno, we had like this one round where we were terrorists and we would just go up mid like 4 people with cArn throwing a flash, and then we would take it from there. And we did that round like,
it was the classic, right?
Yeah, like a whole game versus the Polish guys, like the Golden 5 lineup. We would just go up mid every round, different timings, and just take firefights. And in the end, they had like 4 people, like two CTs at each side of the bracket, if I remember correctly, and they still couldn't stop it. That's like the firepower that we had with Get Right, Force, and Gux. So yeah, I mean, it was like a frustrating style to play against, I think, for teams like MTW, because Avis like he's obviously a thinker about the game. Like he thinks in reactions and how to like rotate and stuff. But all that was like thrown out the window, right? When somebody's up in the middle after 15 seconds and just taking fights.
Sure.
Yeah.
What about, since you referenced him there, Gox, since he didn't play CSGO, I mean, he did technically very, very briefly and at a low level, so it doesn't really count to me, right? People didn't get to see him. Like, they know somewhat Forrest, Get Right. Obviously, those guys have been big names in CSGO. If someone's never seen Gox play, who was he? He is a 1.6 player.
Yeah, I mean, he was a really skilled rifler. Like, he had very fast reactions. I think he used to be like a floorball hockey goalkeeper or something.
Yes.
Now I'm not sure if that like translates to good reflexes or not. Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. But he was like really fast. Like when people would come into his crosshair, he would just like shoot so fast. And I think that was his strength, like as a player, just like insane reactions. So he could easily like kill a lot of people before they even had time to react. And that's, yeah, I mean, that's basically how I see Gox, like a really strong rifler who's like up there and in the same like level or league as Get Right and Forrest when it comes to rifling. And the other greats of the game like Neo and stuff. I think Gox, had he played for longer, he would definitely be up there in that discussion as well.
Now, Get Right, at the time you played with him, was still a relatively young guy. I think he was probably only like 18, 19 or something. This wasn't like the guy that people think of now as like an elder statesman of the game. And at the time, he was definitely a very, very good player. But I remember, partly because the way he left Fnatic was, I mean, it wasn't on the best terms. People had like a personal dispute with some of that stuff. And he definitely like had like revenge in his mind against Fnatic for all the years later. But when you guys played together, one thing I want to ask you about was, in SK and the later teams, he developed his style of play to be very, very famous as, now it's called like a lurker, but he was like even the hard version of that. Like, I mean, the joke I used to have was, before this was a term, like it was a role you could play. I mean, in Sweden, you guys had the slang for it. You were called the Grims, because there was a player called Grims from Too Easy back in the day, which baited the fuck out of everyone and just never went first and just tried to always be the guy where, like, even if you lose the round, it's like, well, I got my 3 kills. It's like, well, yeah, you just baited us all. Like, so the point is that when I say that, that's not meant to be like a term of affection. That's like a diss to call someone that, you know. So when he was in your team, wasn't there some of that kind of going on? Wasn't that part of the reason why there was some kind of like a falling out a little bit? Because I know from what I remember, I think cArn wasn't a fan of that, the fact that Get Right was one of those players from the era of Counter-Strike who they definitely did look like they checked the scoreboard in the game, and they did look like they had it at least in their mind as to how many kills they were getting. And, you know, it was just a newer generation. Was any of this at play, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think for Get Right, like being a young guy, he really wanted to be the best, right? So I think for him, it was certainly important to have like good games and have a lot of stats. And if I remember correctly, he would be the one like checking HLTV and stats after the games. And yeah, it meant more to him than to some of the other players, I would say. In regards to the lurking style, I'm not sure if he developed that style just to like pad his stats. That might be the case, but I think more than anything, he was just like a really good clutch player. So it was actually beneficial for the team to have him alive in the end, because him and Forrest, they would read the situations very well. They would read the game, and he was able to like consistently win those like 1v2s, 1v3s. So I actually think we like to have him in those situations, but yeah, at times it might have felt a little bit like he cared a little bit too much about the stats, and if he had a bad start, I would say it affected him a little bit more than the other players. Like, let's say he would start like 0-4, 0-5 in a game. He would definitely be harsh on himself.
How would you describe him as a teammate? Because one thing I found very interesting is I can totally see why early in his career he was a bit of a spicy teammate and some people did or didn't like him, because his mentality, it can be good and bad. He's just a guy who is the definition of a try-hard. Like in the game, he plays every, you know the joke, like if you were playing like a semi-important game, it's not a real match. If someone's just trying too hard and they're playing every 1v1 super slow, you just say like, come on mate, it's not the CPL final. Well, the joke is Get Right did play every game like it was a CPL final. So when you're in a lower level, people are going to make fun of you for that. When you're on the top level, that can obviously be awesome as a teammate. So how was he as to play with, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think like it was good that it was like that, because like naturally, if you talk about the mix of the players, like now I just said that we played like very aggressively, and we would send Get Right Gux and Forest to hunt people, but then like after that initial fight where people would go down, there would be a little bit of a stalemate, I guess, and that's where if Get Right was alive, he would be the one to like slowly move around and find the openings. So he was more of a careful player in that sense. Still very good, but careful. He would find the openings a bit slower than other players. But I never like thought about it like he was a Grims or he was a player that's annoying to play with because you're just like waiting for them to do something. I just think he realized pretty early that he had a knack for moving around slowly and catch people off guard and like played mind games with people. And I think that's what he started to utilize. And I think he was probably a better player because of it. But it's also a fine balance, right? Because it can also make you a bit like you don't want to commit, right? Like
Sure.
you need a player that can do both, who can like step on the gas when needed, and who can like read the situation and know when to be passive. And I think Get Right had both for sure. I'm not sure about CS:GO. I haven't like watched all of his game or anything. Maybe you have better insight of how he's in CS:GO, but to like from my understanding, he's still quite a passive player.
Now, one of the classic rivals for you guys was the Poles. It was Neil and Taz's team, because just it felt like so many important moments in both of your careers you met. And well, the funny thing is, they obviously they won so many championships. I mean, there's a reason they called the Golden Five. Like, it was a great nickname. Like, this 5 players did just somehow get so many championships. But it's funny because people think I'm hating on them if I say this, but what amazed me about their team was, if I went back and I look at the circumstances going into some of these big matches, these majors, these big semi-finals, whatever, a lot of the time they weren't supposed to be the one that won those matches. Like, actually, it was the other team. Like, your team was number 1 ranked, or your team would have beat them in a previous tournament. Like, what I was always amazed was it felt like overperformance, or they just somehow had something special when it was a big, big match. Like, in some ways, like, I don't want to say they stole the championships, but like, if you put on paper, like, how many should they have won beforehand, maybe they get a few, but you wouldn't think they'd get like 7 or 8 or something crazy like that. So how did you see this team? Because it feels like it has to be one of the most unusual teams we've ever had in Counter-Strike.
Yeah, I mean, like, I think their style was like very high energy, right? They're like Polish. They would come with the Polish flag and have a lot of national pride, and they would be like a lot more loud than we would be. They would like take a lot of space in the rooms and
shout
just
stuff,
like,
all sorts of shit. Yeah,
shout all sorts of shit and like pumping each other up. But they were also like super good players, right? They had Neo, who was obviously an X factor at that time, arguably like one of the best players, if not the best player in the game. And they had Cuban and Lord, who were sort of these newcomers, very talented Polish players. And when you say, do I think they should have won less championship? Not necessarily, actually. I think they were always like a good team. And in that sense, they were a little bit like FNATIC through its different iterations, that in the fact that they were always competing pretty much, right? They always had the potential to win tournaments. Like, they had players of that caliber. So I think, on a good, maybe they had a little bit more up and downs, like losing early in tournaments. I can't really remember if this is
true
or not.
They used to bomb a bunch of the basically whatever wasn't the major, they just bomb, and then they come to the major and you think, right, well, hope that team turns up, and then they'd just be like at the peak level for some reason.
Yeah, so maybe they had a little bit more of that than we did, but they certainly had a really high peak level, right? So when they would come in at peak shape, they had practiced a lot, they were motivated, they were always like a contender. So I would say,
if they were shouting, etc., was there anything intimidating about it? Did it affect you at all, do you think?
No. I don't think that. I just think it's like a different way of looking at it. We were more quiet. We did shout a little bit sometimes, but then at some other teams, they were more like vocal about winning rounds and stuff. And I think that has both a positive side and a negative side, right? Because you're winning a pistol round, you're all pumped, you're shouting. Then you lose to like a force by the next round, and you're totally quiet, right?
Sure.
Like you're inflating a balloon, and then you're just poking a hole at it, and like everybody becomes quiet. So our approach was always to be like more, I mean, have some sort of energy, but be more calm about like shouting and stuff. We didn't want to hype ourselves up too much and get that adrenaline flowing, like to the point where we couldn't like calm ourselves down if needed. They had a different approach, and I think that worked for them, right? Taz was, I can remember, he was probably like standing up and screaming things to other teams.
Sure.
They would sort of berate other teams and get in their face a little bit more, but I can't really remember what they used to say or what they used to scream. But it worked for them. Like, that was their style.
Right. Now, in the early days of CS, one of the people I was pretty friendly with was Vestlan, who was obviously like a old school in-game leader and was one of the first people going to these big pro tournaments. And he had like quite an infamous moment that happened, unfortunately, which people might remember, where he went 0-12 in a max rounds 12 game against SK. And it wasn't just that. The embarrassing thing was, because he really was a guy who believed in like the sporting side of esports, and that you're not just supposed to play it as a game, you're supposed to compete as if this is like the world championship. It wasn't just that he went 0-12, is that before it, he said the infamous words where he basically said in Swedish, like, you know, like, we're going to make history, we're the best, like, you know, we can beat these guys. Which the problem is, in a movie, of course that would be in it. That would be the speech you'd give that would make your team overcome, you know, the bullies, the one that's supposed to beat you. And then at the end of the movie, that'd be the most awesome way for like the emotional high to happen, right? But it just looked silly because he lost the game. When you were in your FNATIC team, were you or cArn, were you the sort of guys, would you give a speech? Was there any of this element to trying to be a team? Did you just play the game? What was it like?
No, I mean, we would have like pre-game talks. They wouldn't be so dramatic. Like,
okay,
we're the best team. We're gonna make history. It wasn't like that. It was more like, yeah, we know we're a good team. Like, and some points of things to focus on before the game, I guess, like reiterating some rounds and like going through how we think the other team is going to play. Usually more like and usually like pulling a joke or something, get people in a good mood. It wasn't like the gladiator-esque sort of speech where Vestlan is like an emperor and he's going to make history.
Sure.
No, it wasn't like that. Yeah. But yeah, it's funny that you mentioned that, because I remember they actually made a frag movie out of that game, right? It's a Vestlan frag movie where it's like 12 deaths. And I remember some LAN event, he was pretty pissed about seeing that. He felt a bit
understandably, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's a little bit angry at the guy who made it. I think he took it quite personal. Vestlan was one of those guys who really wanted to win, and he would be like pissed if he lost. I remember one time at the WCG qualifier in Stockholm, they lost to a Swedish team called A.W.P.
Yes.
And they played with a girl in the team called Queen. And yeah, they lost that game. So it was 4 guys and a girl that they lost to. And I remember, because I was playing that tournament too and watching that game, I remember Vestlan after that game, he took his keyboard and he just like kneed it, and like keycaps flying everywhere. So yeah, definitely quite emotional about the game.
What were you like in that regard? Because one of the things that's interesting is I've known some CS players where it is life and death to them. Like, they really do think of it like a great sportsman thinks of the time they were in a European Cup final they lost, or a World Cup final they lost. Like, some of them really do look back on it and like the losses haunt them, the ones that they think they should have won, or it was a big moment and it would have been so big for their career. If you think of some of the you had a lot of successes and won many championships, but there was definitely big times. I mean, obviously, like some of them against the Poles, some against NTW. There was times where you guys could have won more majors, could have won more big championships. Are you a guy who can you handle the losses? Can you just put them in the past? Do you ever think back, if you look back on your career?
Yeah, I mean, I think I can handle losses pretty well. Like, I wouldn't get so emotional about them. Like, I usually wouldn't get angry or like slam things into the table. But there was one time where we were in China and we played a tournament versus SK. In a final, I think it was an IM stop in Chengdu or something.
Yes.
And we played on train, and I went, and this is fun, this is like embarrassing just talking about, but I went -113 on the team side. And I think
created, did you?
Not a lot of people know this, because I'm not sure if it was like stream back then or they didn't have HLTV or something, but it was, in a final, you go -113. I was like -0.7 or something. and I threw an HE like straight into Force face, and then I was -1/8.
Right.
And so that was one of those times that after the game, because we would usually do like a internal raffle for like who got the check, the like price check, and who would get like if there was some like trophy or something.
Okay.
And I was getting the check at that time, or I got the check like through our internal raffle. There was the second place. We lost that final, and I was so pissed. I remember just like destroying it at the hotel room and leaving it there, like totally tearing it apart. Because like coming back to talking about SK, like that is not a game you want to go like -113 in on the side. That was just like super embarrassing. And even though I can laugh about it now, yeah, that sort of sucked. Other times I've been angry about losing or like sad about, I guess, the WTG final versus the Poles in China as well. I think we were like at our peak at that time, like 2009. We won pretty much everything. We had won a semis versus MTW where I think we like steamrolled them. Yeah. We were so confident, and we just couldn't play well in that final. And I think I played pretty badly myself in that final too. So that was a hard one. I remember Get Right was very emotional after that loss as well. So those two, I think, are the ones that I vividly remember as being like hard for different reasons, for totally different reasons. One was more like an individual thing, and one was just like a big tournament that we lost, I would say.
One of the interesting things back then was obviously the scene was way, way smaller. And so if you're in Sweden, for example, you know, there's SK and FNATIC, and then maybe you'd have like a third team that can go to some events, but maybe not all the time. Like they might not have as good sponsors like Lemon Dogs or H2K or Big Rip or someone. So in this sort of a small scene, even if moves don't happen, there's nearly always, like behind the scenes, it's like Game of Thrones, there's always someone trying to make their plan happen next. So, you know, trying to befriend a player and get him to play with them, or trying to break up a different team and get the star player to come and join their team. DSN stayed in FNATIC, like I say, we're talking about like, I think maybe like 6 or 7 years, like a long time of your career. You didn't move around teams at that point in time. Was there ever a moment you could have left, or you thought about leaving, or maybe we could have seen like SK DSN? Was there ever a possibility for a move like this in your career?
I don't think so. Like ever since FNATIC, or the day I joined FNATIC, I don't think I ever thought about leaving FNATIC. I always thought I would retire in FNATIC. Whenever that would be, because I really enjoyed working with the players we had there. And like the alternative would have been to go to SK, right? If you're talking about Sweden, and we always had that rivalry going on. So it's like, if you're a player in football, for example, in Manchester United, or you don't want to end up in Liverpool, right?
Sure.
And I sort of felt that same way. Like FNATIC was our little clique of Swedish players versus the other, you know, more storied ones maybe. And I think that is a big part of why I never wanted to leave FNATIC. Like I wanted to have success with the people in the team, like Forrest and cArn, because I really enjoyed playing with them, and I think they were great players. And I also think like during the FNATIC days, I also think we were the better team than SK for the most part.
Sure.
So it wouldn't have made sense anyway.
Since, as we referenced earlier in the interview, when you were coming up was when there was this NIP, SK dynasty, where they had the teams that were winning all the big championships in Dallas and getting all the prize money, and these were the biggest names in all of Counter-Strike. If you consider that period in time, there's no exaggeration. We can say when you were in FNATIC, that was a dynasty. This team was the team of the year sometimes. They won many, many championships. You won majors in this team. What does it mean to you to have been part of your own kind of like Counter-Strike dynasty?
I mean, yeah, it's obviously fun to have left a mark on the Counter-Strike world somehow. I mean, FNATIC now, like if we look at this day and age, they have a very long history of success in Counter-Strike, and it feels good to be like a small part of that. We were sort of the guys who started like FNATIC success within Counter-Strike as a game. So yeah, I mean, it feels great. Like, I mean, I'm not looking back at all the medals now, or like thinking about that we won. It's more like about the experiences we had together, and the fact that you get to meet so many cool people and compete, like, and have fun. Obviously, success is important too. Like, I wouldn't say success is important, but looking back at it now, it was like a combination of everything that makes my experience in Counter-Strike like so great. So yeah, I think that's pretty much like the summary of it. Being able nowadays to like, I could go to so many different countries, and I know that there will be people in those countries that we competed against. You can always like hit people up, and
Sure.
like if I go to China, I would know some player there, or Brazil, you would know players there. And that's what I really liked about like the 1.6 community. It was a lot smaller, right? So it's more like tightly knit. Maybe nowadays when people go to like CSGO tournaments, I'm not sure how much the teams like hang out with each other or anything. I'm sure they have a very busy schedule, and they might not have time to like enjoy themselves so much as we did. But I think it's sad, because that was really the biggest like takeaway from the experience for me.
Right, obviously, it was a long, long time ago you did play 1.6, but nowadays, actually, people put a lot of the old demos like on YouTube and stuff. People don't even necessarily have to go and figure out how to play the demo and find all those players and shit that we needed back in the day. So can you remember off the top of your head, what's like a classic DSN game? Can you remember a tournament or a game where you were playing really well? If someone wanted to try and look it up, maybe they could go look this up and they might get a sense for who you were as a player.
Oh my God, that is hard. It's a bit embarrassing, but I can't really remember like a game.
But what year do you think it was your peak? What would you have picked for that? They can maybe narrow it down that way.
The peak, I mean, it would have been like, I think I was pretty good when we played with 10th pole.
All right, yeah, so 2006?
2000, yeah, was it 6 or 7? Yeah, 2006 maybe 2007, like around that time. Okay. I think when Get Right and Forrest came into the team, obviously we were a better team, but they took a lot more space in the server, so it wasn't really up to me to mow people down in the same sense. So I would say, yeah, somewhere around like 2006 to 2008. I can't remember exactly which year, but that was probably when I had the most success as a player individually. That doesn't mean that I was like the best player. I think I was still better as a player, yeah. But like compared to other people, the other people in the team, and maybe to the opposition, I had the biggest edge on other players during those years, I would say.
Yeah, I would say if anyone's watching this and they're going to look, though, if they're going to look up to a 2006, 2007 DSN, even though he said before he had a really bad game against the Poles later in his career, Train's probably the map to look up here. Like, this was the AWP map, right? And it's one that I'm pretty sure you must have some banging CT sides on CT Train.
Yeah. Train was fun because, yeah, the smokes in 1.6, they were not that great, right? So it's
exactly.
You wouldn't have the option as a terrorist team to like smoke out an AWPer, so it was definitely fun playing Train. Train is one of those really fun 1.6 maps, I think. Maybe for demo, like CPL final versus, I can't remember what the name of the team was, but the Norwegians, like Element
Meteor Makers.
Yeah. They were Meteor Makers at that time, yeah. That final, maybe. That was a good tournament for us, so that would be one to watch, maybe.
Yeah, there you go. Right, now, since you retired in 2011, a lot of people, if they haven't kept up with things, might not even know that you've done anything in esports since. They might just think, oh, it's just like you just disappear into the wilderness. Now, as far as I know, because of your experiences in 1.6 in all these different countries, and at the time, actually, at the end of 1.6, if people don't know this, Asia became a massive factor in the game, because not only did we have these huge tournaments over there, but then, for example, companies like Intel, some of the other ones, they would do like PR tours. I mean, I know your team did one back in the day, SK did them. Like, what is it about the Asian region or some of these countries that drew you to? Because eventually you decided to go and live there before you even got back into esports, right?
Yeah, so I went to Taiwan to study actually after esports, and I think what initially drew me here was that there was a void to fill after Counter-Strike, right? Like a traveling void mainly, or a new experience void, because I was so used to like traveling around for like half of the time of a year we were on the road or something, like half a year, for many years in a row. So when I stopped and like I found myself just being at home in Sweden, and it felt sort of empty, there was something missing, right? Like it just felt like I wasn't really suited to just sit in an apartment in Sweden and play cards. So that's why I decided to move to Taiwan eventually, to get the change of like a change in scenery of sorts, and in culture and environment. And since I did that, I've been in Asia now for like 5 years or something. So I guess I'm stuck here. And yeah, I really enjoy living here. It's different than Sweden. It's a little bit more going on, more people, but it really fits me.
So how did you come to get back into esports then? Because we're talking like quite a while ago. It was like 2016 now when you came and it was announced you were the coach of this team called B.O.O.T, which is from, I think it's from Singapore, right? Or something. So what's the story on coming back and becoming a coach in CSGO?
Yeah, so at that time I was living in Taipei, in Taiwan. And I got a message from a guy we had worked with FNATIC before. It's a Chinese guy, and he was starting a team, and he basically asked me, hey, do you want to come to Shanghai and coach this team? And yeah, after some thinking, I decided to go for it. Like, that was sort of a weird, opportunity that came to me, and yeah, it was hard. I mean, traveling to China, living there, especially like the player culture and the language were big obstacles, right? Because I've been used in Sweden playing with players that are like self-motivated and that think the game in a different way that Chinese people do. Like, most Chinese teams are very aim-based, right?
Yes.
They don't put so much emphasis on like strategy. So it's a little bit like it's more dependent on how they're hitting their shots that day. So yeah, it was a bit hard to like implement any sort of structure. So I wouldn't say that I had so much success, because at first I coached a team in Shanghai, right? A Chinese team. We had 2 teams in B.O.O.T. But then when I switched to a Singaporean team, obviously they speak English. It was a little bit easier for me to work with them. Like, they would understand what I wanted from them. And with that team, I mean, we had some success. Like, I mean, we're Asian after all. Like, it's not like we went to the tournament and
you didn't win, of course. Yeah, sure.
We didn't win, but I mean, at least we went from not being able to go to these tournaments to actually get those experiences. Like going to IM Sydney, we went to Cologne. Tournaments of that caliber, and that means that you get to play versus the Liquids of the world and the SKs of the world, and for an Asian team, or like for us at that time, just that was like a huge experience and a big step. But knowing the landscape now, right? I mean, you can't really say there's any Asian team that's even close to competing for any titles, or even close to like getting out of groups nowadays, I guess, at bigger tournaments. So yeah, I mean, obviously it's a very big difference from being a coach or working with a team in Europe or a team in America, I would say.
So what do you do now with the team you're working with now, Paper Rex? I mean, it just says on the Wikipedia page, organization. So you're not the coach. So what does that mean you do with this team? What's the concept behind DSN's involvement?
Yeah, so I'm a little bit involved in the day-to-day with the team as well. Because, I mean, ultimately we're going to expand to other games as well, hopefully. But it is quite a new project. We started in February this year with the Counter-Strike team. Because me and the other founders of this company are all old Counter-Strike players. So even though we know like we're in Asia, it's probably not the best decision, like from a business perspective or anything, to go into Counter-Strike, right? Because there's just like, unless something changes drastically in Asia, there's not so much like, I don't see an Asian team just like starting to crush international Counter-Strike tournaments in a very, very long time. So it's more like a passion project, I would say, to start with Counter-Strike. So what I do is, I basically manage them like any manager would do in another team as well, I guess, scheduling things for them, making sure they have everything they need, like being a little bit involved in the game when I can as well, but also doing some other things within the company. We also have like a community website called csgotoasia.com, which is also like a passion project where we try to report about the Asian scene a little bit. Because HLTV, while they do report about Asian CS, they don't put up the Asian matches. There are certain conditions, right? Due to like problems with match fixing and everything.
Sure.
So CSGO to Asia is like a place where we try to like tell a story about the players in Asia, about the teams in Asia, and give them sort of an outlet to learn a bit more about the scene here, because people are passionate about Counter-Strike in Asia. It's just that, the skill is not really here, I guess.
Sure. Now, one thing about your position at the moment in the game is some people might wonder, oh, is the plan now, like, are you just trying to climb the ladder of being a coach? You know, you're coaching there because that's where you got your opportunity, but, you know, you're waiting for whatever, FaZe Clan or some big Evil Genius. You're waiting for some big Western team to give you an offer, and then you're going to come back to Europe, or you're going to go to North America, you're going to be a coach there, you're going to coach at the majors and stuff. Now, I understand that's not the plan at all, right? DSN's kind of staying put, and you want to live there and you want to do what you're doing now.
Yeah, I mean, like, I think there are certainly people that are more, better suited to be a coach in some of these teams. Like, I mean, I did come from 1.6, which is, it's an help, but I would say Counter-Strike Go is a totally different team. Sorry, not different team, totally different game.
Sure.
A lot has developed, and, people are getting better. You can't just come like, hey, I used to play Counter-Strike in 2011. I'm going to be a great coach or anything. I know everything about the game. No, I think the best coaches now are the ones who like have experience in the regions where it's more like cutthroat. Like in Europe, for example, like the coaches there, like being able to watch and practice versus good teams, being able to like try things out versus good teams. Like, even if we come up with good, cool stuff here in Asia and try it out and it works in Asia, then you go to Europe and you probably get smashed, right? So you need that sort of competitive environment, I think, to become really good. And it also develops you as a coach, right? Like, I think for me, there are certainly a lot of things I would have to learn to even think about going to a team of that caliber. And like you said, that's also not something I'm particularly interested in, because I like to live here in Asia. I would like to leave my mark on the local scene here, because I think, like I said, it's like a lot of passionate players, a lot of passionate team owners that put money into this. And maybe someday, that's the vision for all of us here, I guess. But maybe someday we will have a team again who will rise to become a little bit more like Tyloo was back in the days, where they could actually beat some of these better teams, right? So yeah, that is what we hope is going to happen. If it's going to happen, well, maybe not super likely, but yeah, we have a dream at least.
Right, at the end of this interview, do you have like some final words for us, or is there someone you'd like to thank or say hello to if they've watched?
No, not really. If you ever want to watch some Asian Counter-Strike, make sure to tune into some Paper X games, I guess. It's a bunch of nice lads playing Counter-Strike. But then not really. Not that I can think of now. I would just like to thank you for the interview, I guess. I think it's great that you're one of those figures in esport that are very passionate about it. You've obviously been in esport journalism for as long as I have been playing, and then I stopped in 2011, and you're still going strong. So yeah, it's really fun to see. What a lot of people don't know is that you actually started writing about the same time that I started to playwright in a team. Yeah. So you've been you've been around for a long time now. They should put you in a museum.
Some people do say that. Yeah. All right. Tack så mycket.
Yeah. Thank you so much for the chat, and hope to see you at an event soon.
This video was kindly supported by Alexander Rao, Dean Tanglis, Emanuel Särnbratt, JDubs, NateDOhDoubleG, the Puyolup Tribe, Tobias Bernasconi, Zinged, and a special thanks always goes out to Jerky's Minion. Do you want to suggest a topic or a guest for my shows? Maybe ask a question in my monthly video AMA? Do you want teasers? Who are the guests on my next content? Maybe you want to take part in one of those donated discussions with me where we go really deep into the weeds. Well, if so, put your money where your mouth is and join the Scrilluminati today in the description box link below.